Hello and welcome. I'm Matthew, the hybrid, the designer and developer. This is a GraphQL series, which is meant to drill and bend the concept and understanding of GraphQL in such a way that you can be able to answer interview questions, questions that test your overall understanding. Where does GraphQL fits in? What do I mean by that? I am asking, since there is all pieces of technologies, a lot of pieces of technologies, Node.js, React.js, JavaScript, and you name them, where does GraphQL fits in? In order for us to understand where does GraphQL fits in, we just need to take a train back into database querying. Okay, how do we access information from the database, or what applications are doing with the information that we are feeding them? Okay, so if this is an application, let me just quickly change the color there. If this is an application, it receives data from the UI. We send a lot of information about ourselves in the application and in the websites, in applications like Facebook. When you start a new account, you always give a lot of information about you. So you are feeding the application. Obviously, since the application has got different environment, the application can be on the web and the application can be on the mobile. So the app itself doesn't really store this information. This information is stored somewhere else. And where that is, in a server, in a database. Okay, so the idea here is the application takes the information when it knows that it's 100% correct or it's suitable for the database. It will send it to the database, and also it will query the information from the database. Okay, so this part, it's the front end. Okay, and then let me just say this part, it's the back end. Okay, so it's like we are sending information to the database and we are retrieving it. Okay, so let's just look at the pieces of technologies that are involved, a network of technologies, or let's just call it a tech stack. Okay, all the pieces of technologies that are involved in this process. Okay, only those that are involved in getting the information in to the database and getting it back. Okay, so what we can learn from here is that we've got a database. Okay, we've got a database. There is a lot of databases. Okay, we've got a database. A database is just a storage container that stores the information. Usually it is not in the application and it is not in the user interface. That's what we need to know here. Okay, and then there is an application. Okay, when I'm talking about the application, I'm just referring to some sort of a tech, okay, or a language or an SDK. Okay, some sort of the programming language or techniques that have been used to create the app. As you know that there is a lot of languages. There is PHP, you create web apps. There is Kotlin and Java for Android apps. There is a lot of languages. There is React.js, there is Next.js. Okay, so when I'm talking about the app, okay, I'm talking about like the pieces of technologies, the language, and the SDK. Here, I'm talking about all the databases, you name them, MongoDB, NoSQL, SQL databases. I'm talking about all of them. Okay. And then in the front end, okay, somewhere here, let's say in the UI, okay, let's just say that we've got your React.js. Okay. Let's say, okay, as a UI library or a library for building user interfaces. Okay, so what we are starting to learn from this, okay, is that we've got the user interface, which is the front end, we've got the application, and we've got the back end, okay? So what we are going to do, we are going to zoom in, okay, in this process of sending information from the application to the database and the database back to here. Matthew, what do you mean? I'm trying to say GraphQL in some way here. I have already started to pinpoint a location, okay, for GraphQL, even though I'm going to zoom in. But please pin GraphQL in this part, okay? This is the location of GraphQL. So whenever we are talking about GraphQL, obviously we are using some of the GraphQL functionalities in the front end. I understand that, but we are just sending the information, okay? That's it's not the core essence, okay? User interface is some sort of a node that is affected into this network, but it doesn't carry the essence of what GraphQL is trying to solve, okay? The problem domain of GraphQL is somewhere between the application itself and the database, okay? So let's say you are trying to speak to someone, okay? And a loud and a silly and a noisy guy interrupts you, okay? And saying something else before the information reaches the other part, okay? So GraphQL is doing that. The application wants to communicate to send information to the database, and GraphQL comes and say, whoa, this is the better way of doing things. I hope you understand where GraphQL fits in, even though we're going to get into details, but I hope you understand where it is. I hope I have managed to some sort of focus your mind into a certain section of the program development lifecycle, or the application architecture, okay? So between the app and the database, let's talk about how things were done before. Obviously, GraphQL is not some sort of a new way, but it's some sort of an improvement. GraphQL is improving something that has been there, okay? So if this is the database, okay, if this is the database and this is the application, okay, there was a way before GraphQL by which we communicate to the database, okay? Number one, instead of communicating directly from the app to the database and the database to the app, okay, there is a middleman here, and that middleman is API. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what that is. So there is a middleman, and that middleman is API. Okay, now we are introducing another term. Okay, and then we're not going to get in details into APIs, but APIs exposes endpoints. Okay, meaning that this is a front end, it ends here, and this is a back end, it ends here. Somewhere in between, okay, there are points here which are exposed by an API, okay? Let's just say users, okay? The front end does whatever it does, but it ends here in this point, okay? After this, the API will communicate with the database, and then it will send back all the information about users, okay? Then let's say here there is employees, okay? And then here there is like some sort of balances, let's say, okay? As you can see that there is an API which exposes endpoints, okay? However, there is some sort of a problem with this system, okay? Meaning, based on how we were doing things, okay, if you are hitting this endpoint, what you will get, what is that the API will do, okay? An API on the user's endpoint, okay, let's say the address of this will be like API forward slash endpoint. Okay, so as soon as the user interface or the front end makes a fetch request to this API, usually it's in form of a URL. Okay, let me just give you an example. Okay, it's gonna be, let's say, coded design, www.codeddesign forward slash API forward slash users. Okay, this endpoint is responsible for giving you a list of users. Okay, this endpoint, it's like a cooked food. Okay, some sort of a bucket with a list of users. What if maybe you want to only get one user instead? Okay, it will mean that the API needs to expose another endpoint. Okay, which will enable you to get only one user. Okay, what if maybe you want to get certain users by a certain criteria? Okay, that means the API need to expose another endpoint. Okay, the API need to expose another endpoint. Okay, so that you can get that. Okay, as you can see here, we are starting to have a lot of endpoint. Okay, now hitting the point home, getting deep into where does GraphQL fits in into this tech stack. Okay, we have identified here, okay, that GraphQL is somewhere there in the back end. Okay, somewhere there in the back end, it's in between the app and the database. Okay, now we said before we had some ways in which we are communicating. GraphQL is not like a the Mr. Know it all or very new, or GraphQL doesn't really invent things. Okay, but it's coming with a certain way and approach, a school of thought. Okay, so we were using these APIs. So the problem with these APIs is that when you hit this point, you might get 10 records. Okay, whereas you only wanted one record. Okay, mathematically you can see that if I'm looking for one record and I always get 10 record, I have a duty to pick up the record that I want. If I was looking for record number 4, I have to pick up record number 4. But GraphQL comes as a superhero. Okay, GraphQL comes as a superhero to say that, okay, you are using API, I understand that, but I can act as an API myself. Okay, meaning that eliminating the API. Okay, so that when you want, as an app, you want to communicate to your database, you can communicate through me. It will happen. You just need to brief me and give me the details of your data structure. Okay, what is the structure, the schema of your data? And provide, let me just write here. Okay, provide me with your data structure. Let's say the structure of your data. Okay, on users, we've got a user ID. Let's say user ID and username. Okay, this ID, it's a number. My apologies for my bad writing. This ID is a number and the name is a string. Okay, you provide GraphQL with this schema. Okay, the structure of your data, and then from then GraphQL will ask you, okay, now provide me with some functions. Let's say, okay, some functions that I'm going to use when exposing information back to your user interface or back to your front end. Okay, let's say we are going to have a function here which is going to be get user. Okay, and let's say get all users. Okay, as you can see here, you are getting a user and here you are getting all users. Okay, and then let me just erase this. My apologies for that. Let me just erase this. Let me first not get into some sort of functions, okay, so that I can hit the point home. Okay, so that you can see the essence of GraphQL. Okay, now GraphQL knows your structure. Okay, you've got the ID and the name. Okay, Now, let's see how different GraphQL is from the API. Okay, the API had endpoints. Okay, GraphQL tells us that if you have given me the structure, okay, of your data, okay, and also you have introduced me to your actual data as GraphQL. Okay, you have introduced me to your actual data. I can use the structure of your data, okay, the form, how your data is, okay, to query, okay, meaning that I'm replacing the API to query the information. But I don't only do that, okay, once the information is here with me, meaning that once I have the ID, okay, a list of IDs, let's say from 1 up to 1,000, 1, 2, 3, up to 1,000, and also the names from 1 up to 1,000, okay, you can tell me in a very simple way, instead of hitting an endpoint, you can just, from your front end, you can just create a JSON object which will look like users, and then tell me that you want the name and close that. Okay, and then from then I will deliver only, okay, the list of names. Okay, what if maybe you want with some IDs, you can just add that. You don't need to work that much. Okay, as you can see, now we have erased these endpoints, lot of endpoints here. Okay, meaning that by substituting this endpoint and putting GraphQL between the database and the application, remember, we wanted to know where does GraphQL is, okay? We were saying it's between the application and the database. Now, between the application and the database, there is an API. So GraphQL is coming in and saying to the API, can I sit where you are and make things better for the developers, okay, to improve the developer experience and efficiency of the overall application. So not only GraphQL is between the database and the application, but GraphQL is sitting here where the application, the API is. GraphQL is sitting here to say that, look, I can do this job better than you. So meaning that on your front end, you just give me a JSON object and tell me what you want. What if maybe I want this information in a different way? GraphQL is saying that you don't need to hit multiple endpoints. I can do that for you. Okay. Now, let's just extend this awesomeness of GraphQL. Okay. This database, okay, let's say it's my SQL or it's MongoDB or whatever, okay, it has got some sort of tables, okay, or group of information, okay. This is users, this is authors, these are employees, and these are balances, okay. Now GraphQL is sitting here as a gatekeeper saying, with me you can just tell me what you want. You don't have to worry about the protocol. You don't have to worry about a lot of things. You can just tell me what you want. It's like, as a developer, you are in a shop, okay, driving a shopping cart. I hope this looks like a shopping cart. Let me just do this and do this. You are driving a shopping cart, so you are shopping for things that you want in these tables, okay. This table is users, this table is balances, this table is employees, this table is authors, okay, let's say. Now, instead of hitting multiple endpoints with GraphQL, you can just have a query, okay, and list what you want from here. In users, you want the username. In balances, you want the sum total. In employees, you want the employee IDs. And in, what did I say this is? Whatever it is, okay? It's balances, employees. I just forgot what this one is. Okay, in whatever, you can say amount, okay? Let's say this is amount. And then after you've got that, what do you do next? You drive your shopping cart to your UI, okay? Your shopping cart to your UI, and then you tell the UI that, please display this for me. So meaning that you can even get some sort of data from different tables or different schemas, I can say, with peace. Okay, so I hope now you are starting to get where does GraphQL fits in. Okay, there is the front end. Okay, there is a front end. Let's say the front end is React.js. Obviously, you are going to use GraphQL in your front end because the method that you will be using to fetch the data from a GraphQL server, okay, you need to some sort of use the preferred way of doing that, GraphQL's preferred way of doing it. So you will find GraphQL in your UI, but remember, this is not a problem domain. GraphQL was not solving how you are fetching data from the UI. Okay, but you can find it there. You are going to work with it in React. Okay, and then when you are fetching data into the back end, okay, meaning that now GraphQL is forming part of your back end of your API, what can I say, code, okay, or code base. GraphQL will be there, okay, so that it can act as a gatekeeper to make things easier for you. GraphQL, it's like these new technologies, things like Siri and whatsoever. Okay, these are technologies where you can just get into your house and you can tell it to switch on the light and close the gates. Okay, I think it's pushing us to that direction where it's going to be super simple and efficient, okay, to get data, so that you cannot sit with a lot of data that you still have to filter or to pick what you want. If it happened that you want something different from this collection of data, you will have to hit another endpoint. Where does GraphQL fits in? GraphQL is somewhere between the actual application and the database. To be specific, it's replacing, it's sitting where the API sits to make your life easier. I'm Matthew, the hybrid, the designer and developer. Please don't forget, if this video has helped you in the overall understanding of GraphQL, just hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, for me, see you on the next one.